My successful accountant brother destroyed our 40-year family hardware business with lies and theft. Parents went from comfortable retirement to working at grocery store in their 60s. I never thought I would be writing this post. 3 months ago, I believed my family was solid. My brother Marcus, 35M, and I, 32M, had always been close. We grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone. Our parents, David, 67M, and Linda, 64F, owned a successful hardware store that had been in our family for 40 years. Marcus was the golden child. He got straight A's in school while I struggled with dyslexia. He went to college on a scholarship while I barely graduated high school. He became an accountant and moved to the city while I stayed home and worked construction. Our parents always praised him for his achievements. They would tell neighbors about his big salary and fancy apartment. Meanwhile, they would introduce me as their other son who helps out sometimes. Despite this, Marcus and I maintained a good relationship. He visited every few months and always brought expensive gifts for our parents. He would take me out for beers and we would talk about old times. He never acted superior or made me feel bad about my choices. At least, that's what I thought. 5 years ago, our father had a heart attack. The doctors said he needed to slow down. Mom started talking about retirement and what would happen to the store. She and Dad called both of us for a family meeting. They sat us down in their kitchen, the same table where we ate breakfast every morning as kids. Dad explained that they wanted to leave the store to both of us equally. The building was worth about $400,000 and the business brought in steady income. They had spoken to their lawyer about setting up a trust. Marcus would handle the financial side since he understood business better. I would manage the day-to-day operations since I knew the customers and suppliers. We would split all profits 50-50. Marcus seemed pleased with the arrangement. He shook Dad's hand and hugged Mom. He told them it was a smart plan and he was honored they trusted him with the finances. I thanked them and said I would do my best to keep the business running strong. We all felt good about the future. Over the next few years, Marcus became more involved in the store's finances. He would visit monthly to review the books and meet with our accountant. He installed new computer systems and streamlined the inventory process. Sales improved and we started making more money. Dad and Mom were proud of how well we worked together. Last year, Dad's health got worse. He had another heart attack and spent 2 weeks in the hospital. Mom was stressed and exhausted from taking care of him. They decided to officially transfer ownership of the store to Marcus and me. The lawyer drew up all the paperwork and we signed everything in his office. Marcus explained that the business would be set up as a partnership. He would be the managing partner since he handled the money. I would be the operational partner since I ran the store daily. All major decisions would require both our signatures. The profits would still be split equally between us. Everything seemed fine until 3 weeks ago. I was at the store doing inventory when a man in a suit walked in. He introduced himself as James Peterson from First National Bank. He said he needed to speak with me about the property. I asked him what he meant. He pulled out some papers and showed them to me. According to his documents, Marcus had taken out a loan against the store 6 months ago. The loan was for $200,000 and the store was used as collateral. Marcus had missed the last 2 payments and the bank was starting foreclosure proceedings. I told him there must be some mistake. Marcus would never take out a loan without telling me. We were partners and both our signatures were required for major decisions. Peterson showed me the loan documents. Marcus had signed as the sole owner of the property. My name was nowhere on the papers. I called Marcus immediately. His phone went straight to voicemail. I tried calling his office but his secretary said he was out of town on business. I drove to our parents' house and showed Dad the bank documents. He looked confused and said he didn't understand what was happening. Dad called the lawyer who had handled our paperwork. The lawyer reviewed his files and discovered something shocking. The ownership documents Marcus had us sign were not what we thought they were. Instead of making us equal partners, the papers transferred full ownership to Marcus alone. I was listed only as an employee manager with no ownership rights. The lawyer said Marcus had brought different documents to sign than what we had discussed in the planning meetings. During the actual signing, Marcus had pointed to signature lines and told us where to sign. None of us had read through the entire contract carefully. We trusted Marcus completely and assumed the papers matched what we had agreed upon. I tried calling Marcus again but still got voicemail. I called his office and demanded to speak with him. His secretary said he had taken a leave of absence and she didn't know when he would return. I asked for his emergency contact information but she said she couldn't give that out. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from Marcus's lawyer. The letter stated that Marcus was dissolving the partnership and terminating my employment. I had 30 days to remove my personal belongings from the store. After that, I would be considered trespassing if I entered the property. The letter also explained that Marcus had discovered irregularities in the store's finances. According to his accountant, approximately $50,000 was missing from the business accounts over the past 2 years. Marcus believed I had been stealing money and using my access to manipulate the books. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I had never stolen anything in my life. I barely understood the computer system Marcus had installed. I usually just handled cash sales and left all the banking to him. I had no idea how to access the business accounts or transfer money. I immediately gathered all my financial records and bank statements. I printed out 2 years of my personal banking history and highlighted every deposit. My income came from my salary from the store and occasional construction jobs on weekends. There were no large or unexplained deposits that would suggest stolen money. I took all my documentation to our family lawyer. He reviewed everything and said my records looked clean. He suggested we demand a forensic accounting of the business finances. If money was really missing, a proper investigation would show exactly where it went and who was responsible. The lawyer sent a formal request to Marcus's attorney demanding access to all business financial records. Marcus's lawyer responded that my employment had been terminated and I no longer had any right to examine company information. They said if I continued to make accusations, they would consider legal action against me for defamation. During this time, Mom and Dad were trying to understand what had happened. They kept asking me if I had taken money from the store. I showed them all my bank records and explained that I didn't even know how to access the business accounts. Dad said he believed me, but he was confused about why Marcus would lie. I found out that Marcus had been telling our parents a different story. He claimed that I had been acting strange and secretive for months. He said I had been coming to the store at odd hours and spending time alone with the computer system. He told them he had hired an accountant to investigate and discovered that money was missing. Marcus also said he had tried to talk to me about the missing money, but I had become defensive and angry. He claimed he was forced to take control of the business to protect our parents' investment. He said he still hoped we could work things out, but I needed to admit what I had done and agree to pay back the stolen money. Our parents didn't know what to believe. Marcus had always been the responsible one who handled money matters. I was the one who had struggled in school and never showed much interest in business. From their perspective, it seemed more likely that I would make financial mistakes than Marcus would lie to them. The worst part was watching our parents' reaction. Dad stopped calling me every morning like he used to. Mom would ask careful questions about my finances and seem worried about my answers. They didn't accuse me directly, but I could tell they had doubts. Their trust in me was shaking, and that hurt more than losing the store. I hired my own accountant to review what financial records I could access. He found some concerning patterns in the business accounts. Large transfers had been made to a separate account that Marcus controlled. The transfers were always done on days when I wasn't working at the store. The timing suggested that whoever was moving the money knew my schedule and deliberately did it when I wouldn't notice. My accountant also discovered that Marcus had been paying himself a management fee for the past year. This fee was never discussed with me or our parents. The payments totaled about $30,000 and were listed as business expenses in the books. Combined with the loan money and the suspicious transfers, it seemed like Marcus had taken nearly $250,000 from the business. I presented this information to our parents. Dad looked at the numbers for a long time and then asked me if I was sure about the dates. I showed him the bank statements and pointed out that all the transfers happened when I was working construction jobs on the weekends. Dad knew my construction schedule because I had been helping him with projects around their house. Mom asked why Marcus would do something like this. I said I didn't know, but the evidence was clear. Dad said he wanted to talk to Marcus directly before making any decisions. He tried calling, but Marcus still wasn't answering his phone. A week later, we found out why Marcus had disappeared. His ex-girlfriend Sarah, 29F, contacted me through Facebook. She said she had heard about our family problems through mutual friends. She wanted me to know that Marcus had been living with her for the past month. He had told her that he was going through a difficult business situation but would have everything resolved soon. Sarah said Marcus had been spending money freely since he arrived. He bought a new car and took her on expensive vacations. He had rented them a luxury apartment downtown and was talking about starting a new business. When she asked where the money came from, he said he had finally collected on some investments. Sarah also mentioned that Marcus had been very stressed and was drinking heavily. He would stay up late making phone calls and seemed worried about something. She had overheard him talking to lawyers about asset protection and offshore accounts. When she asked him about it, he said it was just business planning. I shared this information with our parents and the lawyer. Dad was quiet for a long time and then said he couldn't believe Marcus would steal from us. Mom started crying and said she didn't understand how everything had gone so wrong. The lawyer said we had enough evidence to file criminal charges and try to recover the stolen money. The bank foreclosure was still proceeding. We had 30 days to pay the $200,000 loan or lose the store. Our parents had some savings but not enough to cover the full amount. The lawyer said we could try to prove that Marcus had taken the loan fraudulently, but that would take months to resolve in court. I suggested we could sell the store quickly and use the money to pay off the loan. At least that way our parents would get some money back instead of losing everything to the bank. Dad said he didn't want to sell the business his father had built. Mom said she couldn't stand the thought of strangers running the store. The lawyer filed a lawsuit against Marcus for fraud and theft. He also filed for an emergency injunction to stop the foreclosure until our case could be heard. The judge granted us a temporary delay but said we needed to post a bond to cover the bank's costs. The bond required another $50,000 that we didn't have. Our family was falling apart. Dad barely spoke to anyone and spent most of his time sitting in his garage. Mom was taking sleeping pills and seemed exhausted all the time. Their neighbors knew about our legal problems and some people in town were talking about the situation. Our parents felt embarrassed and didn't want to leave their house. I was staying in my childhood bedroom at their house because I couldn't afford my apartment anymore. My construction work had slowed down because word was spreading that my family had financial problems. Some clients were worried I might not finish their projects if I got arrested or had to go to court. Marcus finally called our parents 2 weeks ago. He spoke only to Mom and told her that I was trying to destroy the family with false accusations. He said he had evidence that I had been stealing money for years and he was just trying to protect everyone. He claimed the loan was necessary to keep the business running because of my theft. Marcus also said he would be willing to drop all charges against me if I admitted what I had done and agreed to pay back the money. He suggested I could work for him as an employee and gradually pay off my debt over several years. He said this was the only way to save the family and keep our parents from losing everything. Mom told me about the conversation and asked what I thought. I said Marcus was lying and trying to manipulate us. I reminded her about the evidence we had gathered and the timing of the suspicious transactions. I told her that if I had really stolen $50,000, where was the money? My bank account had less than $3,000 and I was living in their spare bedroom. Dad listened to our conversation and then said he didn't know what to believe anymore. He said Marcus had always been trustworthy and successful while I had made many mistakes in my life. He wondered if maybe I had gotten into financial trouble and taken money without thinking about the consequences. That conversation was the breaking point for me. My own father was considering that I might be a thief based on nothing more than Marcus's accusations. The man who raised me and taught me about honesty was doubting my character because Marcus was better with numbers and wore expensive suits. I decided I needed to find Marcus and confront him directly. Sarah had told me which apartment complex he was living in. I drove to the city and waited in the parking lot until I saw his new car. When he came out of the building, I walked up to him. Update 1: Marcus saw me approaching and tried to get back in his car. I blocked the driver's door and told him we needed to talk. He said he had nothing to say to me and threatened to call the police. I said that was fine because I wanted to talk to them too. We stood in the parking lot for about 10 minutes. Marcus kept looking around like he was expecting someone to help him. I asked him why he had stolen from our family and lied about me taking money. He said I was delusional and that he had proof of my theft. I told him I knew about the management fees he had been paying himself and the suspicious transfers to his personal account. His face changed when I mentioned specific amounts and dates. He said those were legitimate business expenses and I wouldn't understand because I never learned about finance. Marcus then said something that shocked me. He told me that our parents had always planned to leave the business to him alone. According to him, they only included me in the discussions because they felt sorry for me. He said they knew I wasn't smart enough to run a business and they asked him to find a way to let me down gently. I asked him why he would lie about something like that. He said our parents were embarrassed to have a son who barely graduated high school and worked construction. They wanted me to feel included but they never intended to actually make me an equal partner. The paperwork I signed just made it official. This conversation was devastating to hear. If Marcus was telling the truth, then our parents had been lying to me for years. They had let me believe I would inherit half the business while secretly planning to give everything to Marcus. I started doubting everything I thought I knew about my family. Marcus could see that his words were affecting me. He said he never wanted to hurt me but he couldn't let me destroy the business with my incompetence. He offered to give me a job and a small salary if I would stop fighting the legal case. He said this was more generous than I deserved considering I had been stealing money. I told him I had never stolen anything and asked him to prove his accusations. He said his accountant had found discrepancies in the cash handling and inventory records. When I worked alone at the store, money would go missing from the register. He said there were also shortages in expensive tools and equipment. Marcus showed me a folder with printed reports from his accountant. The documents listed dates and amounts of missing money. Most of the incidents happened on weekends when I was working alone. The total came to about $47,000 over 2 years. I looked at the dates carefully and realized something important. Many of the weekends listed were days when I wasn't actually working at the store. I had been doing construction jobs or helping Dad with projects around the house. I told Marcus this but he said I was lying to cover up my theft. I asked Marcus why he had taken out the $200,000 loan if the business was profitable. He said the loan was necessary because of the money I had stolen and because we needed cash flow to expand. He claimed he had been using his own credit to keep the business running while I was draining the accounts. The conversation ended when Marcus said he was tired of my lies and accusations. He got in his car and drove away. I sat in the parking lot for an hour trying to process what he had told me. Either my brother was a skilled liar and thief, or my parents had been deceiving me my entire life. I drove home and found Mom and Dad waiting in the kitchen. They said Marcus had called and told them about our conversation. He had warned them that I was becoming desperate and might try to break into the store or cause other problems. He suggested they should be careful around me until the legal issues were resolved. Dad asked me directly if I had taken money from the store. I looked him in the eye and said no. I asked him if he and Mom had always planned to give the business only to Marcus. Dad was quiet for a long time and then said they had discussed many different options over the years. Mom said they loved both of us equally, but they had worried about my ability to handle business responsibilities. She said Marcus had more education and experience with financial matters. They thought it would be better if he managed the business side while I focused on operations. I asked them why they had never told me this directly. Why did they let me believe I would be an equal owner when they had already decided otherwise? Dad said they didn't want to hurt my feelings and they hoped I would be happy with a management role. The revelation that my parents had never trusted me with equal ownership was almost as painful as Marcus's betrayal. I had spent years working at the store and learning the business because I thought it would be mine someday. I had turned down other job opportunities and made life decisions based on the assumption that I was building something for my future. Mom tried to explain that they still wanted me to benefit from the business. They had planned for Marcus to share the profits with me even if I wasn't an official owner. She said they thought this arrangement would be better because Marcus could handle the legal and financial complexities while I did what I was good at. I asked them if they believed Marcus's accusations about me stealing money. Dad said he didn't want to believe it, but the evidence seemed convincing. Mom said she was confused because she had never noticed money missing, but Marcus's accountant had found discrepancies. I showed them my calendar and reminded them of specific weekends when I had been working construction jobs or helping with house projects. These were the same dates when Marcus claimed money had gone missing from the store. Dad checked his own calendar and confirmed that I had been helping him on several of those days. Mom looked at the dates and said maybe there was a mistake in Marcus's reports. Dad said we should get an independent accountant to review everything. I agreed but said we needed to act quickly because the bank foreclosure was still pending. The next morning, we discovered that Marcus had cleaned out the remaining business bank accounts. Over $15,000 had been transferred to his personal account during the night. He had also canceled the store's insurance policies and terminated the lease on our warehouse space. Our lawyer said these actions proved that Marcus was trying to destroy the business before we could prove his theft. He filed an emergency motion to freeze all of Marcus's assets and get a court order preventing him from making any more transfers. The judge granted our motion, but it was too late to recover most of the money. Marcus had been systematically moving funds for months. The lawyer estimated that he had taken over $300,000 total when you included the loan money, the management fees, and the direct transfers. Dad had a mild heart attack when we told him about the missing money. He spent 3 days in the hospital and came home with new medication and restrictions on his activity. Mom blamed herself for trusting Marcus and said she should have paid more attention to the business finances. The bank foreclosure proceeded despite our legal case. We couldn't raise enough money to pay off the loan and the judge said our lawsuit against Marcus would take months to resolve. The store was sold at auction for less than the loan amount, leaving our parents with no business and a remaining debt of $50,000. Marcus disappeared completely after the foreclosure. His apartment was empty and his phone was disconnected. Sarah contacted me again and said he had told her he was moving to another state to start fresh. She said he had seemed paranoid and was worried about being arrested. Our parents lost everything they had worked for their entire lives. The hardware store that had been in our family for 40 years was gone. Their retirement savings were depleted from legal fees and the remaining bank debt. Dad's health problems meant he couldn't work to rebuild their finances. The worst part was how the situation affected our family relationships. Mom and Dad still had doubts about whether I had been involved in the financial problems. They wanted to believe me, but Marcus's lies had planted seeds of suspicion that were hard to overcome. I moved out of their house and found a small apartment across town. I picked up more construction work and started sending them money every month to help with their expenses. I hoped that my actions would prove my character better than any words could. Update 2: The police finally located Marcus in Arizona. He had been arrested for running a con game at a retirement community. Apparently, he had convinced several elderly residents to invest in a fake business opportunity. When the police searched his apartment, they found financial documents related to our family store. Detective Williams called me to discuss the evidence they had found. Marcus had kept detailed records of how he had manipulated our business accounts. There were spreadsheets showing the dates of transfers, notes about creating false inventory reports, and copies of the fraudulent loan documents he had signed. Most shocking was a journal where Marcus had written about his plans to steal from the family business. The entries went back 3 years and showed that he had been planning this theft long before Dad's heart attack. He had even researched how to frame me for the missing money. One journal entry was particularly disturbing. Marcus wrote that he deserved the money more than I did because he had always been the smart one in the family. He said our parents had wasted too much time and money trying to help me succeed when they should have focused everything on him. The journal also revealed that Marcus had gambling debts of over $100,000. He had been betting on sports and losing consistently for several years. The pressure to pay off these debts had motivated his plan to steal from the business and disappear with the money. Detective Williams said the evidence was strong enough to charge Marcus with multiple felonies. The journal and financial records proved premeditation and showed that he had deliberately tried to frame me. The prosecutor was confident they could get a conviction and substantial prison sentence. I called our parents to tell them about the arrest and the evidence. Dad was quiet for a long time and then apologized for doubting me. He said he should have trusted his own son instead of believing Marcus's lies. Mom cried and said she was sorry for not supporting me during the legal battle. The apology helped, but it couldn't undo the damage that had been done to our relationship. For months, I had watched my parents struggle with whether to believe me or Marcus. Their hesitation had hurt almost as much as losing the business. Dad's health had continued to decline since losing the store. The stress of the situation had triggered more heart problems and he was now on disability. Mom had taken a part-time job at a grocery store to help pay their bills. They were both in their mid-60s and starting over financially. The prosecutor offered Marcus a plea deal if he would return the stolen money and cooperate with restitution efforts. Unfortunately, most of the money was already gone. Marcus had gambled away about $150,000 and spent the rest on expensive lifestyle choices during his months in hiding. Marcus's lawyer said his client was willing to plead guilty and accept a prison sentence, but he couldn't return money he no longer had. The prosecutor said we could try to recover some funds by seizing Marcus's remaining assets, but that would only amount to about $20,000. I had to make a difficult decision about whether to pursue maximum criminal penalties or accept the plea deal that might result in some financial recovery. The lawyer explained that a trial could take years and there was no guarantee we would recover any more money even if Marcus was convicted. Our parents wanted to get whatever money they could as quickly as possible. Dad's medical expenses were mounting and they were struggling to pay basic bills. They asked me to accept the plea deal so they could at least recover something from the situation. I agreed to support the plea agreement even though I wanted Marcus to face the full consequences of his actions. He received a sentence of 4 years in prison and was ordered to pay restitution of $280,000. The judge said he could work in prison industries to earn money toward the debt. The reality was that we would probably never recover most of the stolen money. Marcus would earn maybe $2,000 per year in prison and the debt would take over a century to pay off at that rate. After his release, he could file for bankruptcy and potentially eliminate the restitution obligation entirely. During this time, I learned more details about Marcus's deception from the police investigation. He had been stealing small amounts from the business for over 3 years before escalating to larger thefts. He had manipulated inventory records to hide missing tools and equipment that he sold online. Marcus had also been intercepting business mail to prevent me and our parents from seeing financial statements that would have revealed his activities. He had set up a post office box and redirected bank statements and tax documents to that address. The investigation showed that Marcus had been planning to disappear with a much larger amount of money. His original plan was to take out multiple loans against the business property and drain all remaining accounts before vanishing. My confrontation with him had forced him to flee before completing his scheme. I realized that Marcus had never intended for me to be blamed for the theft. His plan was to take the money and disappear, leaving everyone to assume he was also a victim. The false accusations against me only started when I began investigating the missing money and threatening his escape plan. This revelation was actually more hurtful than thinking he had deliberately framed me. It meant that Marcus had been so focused on his own greed that he hadn't even considered how his actions would affect our family. We were just obstacles to his plan rather than people he cared about. Our parents were devastated to learn the full extent of Marcus's betrayal. Mom said she felt like she had never really known her own son. Dad said he couldn't understand how someone could steal from their own family and feel no remorse about it. The insurance company that had covered our business determined that Marcus's theft was not covered under their policy. They said the coverage excluded losses caused by employees or business partners acting with criminal intent. This meant we couldn't recover any money through insurance claims. I tried to help our parents rebuild their finances, but my construction income was limited. Dad couldn't work because of his heart condition and Mom's part-time job barely covered their basic expenses. They had to sell their house and move into a small apartment. The stress of losing their home and business was affecting both of their health. Mom developed high blood pressure and started taking medication. Dad had another minor heart episode and spent a week in the hospital. The doctors said the stress was making his condition worse. Our extended family and community rallied around our parents during this difficult time. Dad's brother offered them a loan to help with living expenses. Several longtime customers from the hardware store brought them groceries and helped with household tasks. The support from others helped, but it couldn't replace what Marcus had stolen from us. The financial losses were devastating, but the damage to our family relationships was even worse. The trust and closeness we had shared for decades was gone and might never be fully restored. Update 3: Marcus was transferred to a minimum security prison about 6 hours away from our town. The prison allows family visits twice per month, but none of us have gone to see him. Mom asked me if I thought we should visit, and I told her it was her decision, but I had no interest in seeing him. Dad said he couldn't forgive Marcus for destroying our family and causing Mom's health problems. He said that as far as he was concerned, he only had one son now. Mom was more conflicted and said she still loved Marcus despite what he had done, but she couldn't face seeing him in prison. The restitution payment started arriving about 2 months ago. Marcus earns 47 cents per hour working in the prison laundry and sends us about $15 per month. At this rate, it would take him approximately 1,500 years to pay back what he stole. The payments feel more like an insult than any meaningful attempt at making things right. I used some of my savings to help our parents with a security deposit on their new apartment. The place is much smaller than their house, but it's clean and affordable. Dad has adjusted better than Mom to the downsized living situation. She still gets upset when she looks for things that had to be sold or given away. Mom's job at the grocery store became full-time when one of the other employees quit. The extra hours help with their finances, but she comes home exhausted every day. She's 64 years old and never expected to be working retail at this stage of her life. Dad feels guilty that he can't work to support them. I've been taking on larger construction projects to increase my income. A local contractor hired me to help with the housing development, and the work should continue for several months. The steady employment has allowed me to send our parents $400 per month to supplement their income. Our relationship has improved since Marcus's arrest and the evidence that proved his guilt. Dad apologizes frequently for doubting me and says he should have trusted me from the beginning. I told him that Marcus was convincing and had fooled everyone, not just them. Mom struggles more with guilt about the situation. She blames herself for not paying attention to the business finances and for raising a son who could steal from his own family. I've tried to tell her that Marcus's choices were his own responsibility, but she still feels like she failed as a mother. The detective called last week with an update on Marcus's case. Apparently, he has been writing letters to other family members asking for money and claiming he was wrongly convicted. His letters describe me as jealous and vindictive, and say that I manipulated the evidence to frame him. Marcus sent a letter to our cousin Janet asking her to visit him in prison and bring money for his commissary account. The letter claimed that I had stolen the money and convinced everyone to blame him. Janet showed the letter to our parents and asked if they thought there was any truth to Marcus's claims. Dad read the letter and said it proved that Marcus still had no remorse for what he had done. He said anyone who could write such lies after being caught with evidence of their crimes was beyond redemption. Mom agreed but said she was still heartbroken that Marcus couldn't admit the truth and try to make amends. I decided that our family needed to have no further contact with Marcus. His continued lies and attempts to manipulate relatives show that he hadn't learned anything from his conviction. I asked our parents to tell other family members not to believe anything Marcus said in his letters. Our parents agreed that cutting contact was the right decision. Dad said he was tired of Marcus's games and wanted to focus on rebuilding their lives. Mom said she would always love Marcus but couldn't handle his continued dishonesty and manipulation. I helped our parents write letters to extended family members explaining the situation and asking them not to provide money or support to Marcus. We included copies of the police reports and court documents to show the evidence of his crimes. Most family members said they would not have any contact with Marcus. The hardware store building was purchased by a young couple who planned to reopen it as an antique shop. They asked me if I wanted to work for them part-time to help with renovations and setup. I declined because being in that building would bring back too many painful memories. Our parents drive past the old store occasionally and say it's difficult to see strangers working in the place where they spent 40 years building a business. Dad said he tries not to think about what could have been if Marcus hadn't destroyed everything they worked for. I've started dating someone I met through my construction work. Jennifer is a teacher who owns a house that needed some repairs. We've been seeing each other for about 2 months and she knows about my family situation. She says she admires how I've supported our parents despite everything that happened. Jennifer asked if I ever think about trying to rebuild the family business. I told her that the trust and partnership required for a family business were destroyed by Marcus's betrayal. Even if we had the money to start over, I wouldn't want to risk our parents' financial security again. Our parents are slowly adjusting to their new life circumstances. Dad has found some part-time consulting work helping other small business owners with operational issues. The work doesn't pay much, but it gives him a sense of purpose and uses his decades of experience. Mom has made friends with some of her coworkers at the grocery store and seems less depressed than she was a few months ago. She still gets emotional when talking about Marcus, but she's accepted that their relationship may never be repaired. The prosecutor said Marcus will likely serve about 2.5 years if he maintains good behavior in prison. After his release, he'll be on probation for several years and will be required to continue making restitution payments. The prosecutor doubts he'll ever pay back a significant portion of what he stole. I don't spend much time thinking about Marcus anymore. His choices destroyed our family and caused our parents unnecessary hardship in their retirement years. He had every advantage in life and threw it away for money he gambled away or spent on temporary pleasures. Our parents will probably never fully recover from the financial losses Marcus caused. They went from being comfortable retirees to struggling seniors who need help paying basic bills. The stress has affected their health and shortened their lives in ways that can't be measured. I focus now on helping our parents and building my own life. The construction business is going well and I'm considering starting my own company next year. Jennifer has been supportive and understanding about the time and money I spend helping our parents. Some people ask if I'll ever forgive Marcus or try to rebuild our relationship. I tell them that forgiveness requires genuine remorse and attempts to make amends. Marcus continues to lie about his crimes and manipulate family members from prison. There's nothing to forgive when someone refuses to acknowledge their wrongdoing. The experience taught me that family relationships can be more fragile than they appear. Someone you trust completely can betray you in ways you never imagined possible. The damage from that betrayal extends far beyond money and affects everyone connected to the situation. Our family will never be the same as it was before Marcus's theft. The trust and closeness we shared for decades is gone. But our parents and I have grown closer through supporting each other during this difficult time. We've learned we can rely on each other when everything else falls apart. I don't regret fighting to prove my innocence or pursuing criminal charges against Marcus. The truth needed to come out so our parents could understand what really happened. Without that truth, they might have spent the rest of their lives wondering if their other son was also a thief. Marcus made his choices and now he's living with the consequences. Our parents and I are focused on moving forward and rebuilding what we can from the damage he caused. We can't change what happened, but we can control how we respond to it.